Hello, welcome back to Otter Pop Culture. Today we're going to be going over the miniseries of called The Romanoffs. It is a Amazon Prime miniseries, and I think it's one of the best miniseries that Amazon has done. We're gonna go through all the episodes. The episodes are at least like an hour 25 long, so there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So I'll be doing a part one on this video and a part two on the next video. So we're gonna go through episodes 1 through 4, and I'm gonna break down the plot and also talk about like the stuff that I liked about it or what I thought about it, thoughts and concerns. So let's start with the first one. So the first episode is called The Violet Hour, and we're following Greg, who's an American, and his husband and his girlfriend, Sophie, who's French, and they go to visit their Greg's aunt, Aunt Anushka, and she has this gorgeous, huge apartment. It's gorgeous, it's beautiful, and she just suffered from a heart attack, and she's elderly. And so after all of that, Greg decides to give her a caretaker to take care of her for her until she passes away. But their hopes is that they're gonna have inherit the apartment. So that's their goal. So the caretaker comes through, and her name is Hajar, and she is a Muslim woman that also lives in France. And she basically becomes the caretaker of Ashka. And Ashka is pretty xenophobic, so she acts out every bit of it onto Ajar. And Ajar ignores it pretty much because it's her job. Like, this is her job, and so she's kind of like trying to like just turn the other cheek towards it. But it gets to the point where they start actually building a bond with each other, to the point that Anushka decides to give her apartment over to Ajar for all the things that she's done. And so Greg finds out about this and gets pissed and decides to take a different route and takes Ajar on for like a dinner. And so it goes well, and during the time he's trying to convince her to like when it happens, when you get inherited to it, just give it to us. Give us the apartment instead of you having it. So she's like, I don't really know what to do. She told me I can have it, and I don't want it, but I don't really know what to say to her. She doesn't seem to want to budge. So they end up having a connection as well. So it seems like she's very charismatic with the family. So they end up going back to his place, which I'm assuming is his place, because Sophie's nowhere to be found. So they end up fucking, and then the next day they go back to the next day they end up back at Anushka's house, Anushka's house, and they find out that Hajar is actually pregnant. So we find out that she's pregnant, and she's kind of a little like nervous. But then Sophie comes through, and she hears about this. She's pissed. She leaves Greg, but for some reason, after the connection that Greg and Ajar have, because Sophie's a complete bitch. Like, she was nothing but rude to every single person in this whole scene, like this whole episode. So we're assuming like the way that she kind of disappeared was for the best. So for some reason, Greg and Anushka is both happy about this, because it's like they're passing on the Romanoff heritage to the baby. And so also the thing, Anushka is also a Romanoff descendant as well as Greg. So they're all happy about it, and so they move on and just start to like kind of just ends with that being like just they're happy about it. That was it's a very perfect start to the season. It's mostly French. Most of the episodes is all spoken in French, but it's pretty good. It's scenic. It's really nice. So we move on to the next one, which is called The Royal We, and it's episode 2. So we start off with Michael and Shelly, and Michael is a Romanoff descendant as well. And they start them off at a marriage counseling meeting where they're trying to work out their marriage because she wants to do all this like stuff and be active and do stuff with him and do everything, but but he wants to be a potato. So, and doesn't really feel very inspired. So they start talking more, but one thing he is passionate about is the Romanoff legacy. So Shelly decides to sign them up for a cruise because they thought it would be really fun. It's a cruise that's based off. It's like just for the Romanoffs, Romanoff descendants. And so there they've learned more about it. And so they agreed to go, but then they find out that Michael has jury duty. So he ends up going to jury duty. It was supposed to be 1 day, but it ends up being 2 days or more, the whole weekend, because he falls for this girl in during the jury deliberation named Michelle, and she's a beautiful British woman, and he likes her so much that he puts the whole deliberation into gridlock, and now throughout the whole weekend. So with that said, the result of that meaning, Shelly decides to go by herself to the cruise, and she has a great time. She meets a guy that's there. It's a beautiful, gorgeous guy, and it all goes well, but she doesn't sleep with him. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Michael is trying to pursue Michelle. They end up kind of clicking somehow, and they end up going to Michael's lake house and fucking there. And then he never hears from her for a while. And so Shelly gets back and she's like, oh my God, did you hear about this? This is happening there. And she was so excited about the whole cruise and tell him all about it. But he's more obsessed over Michelle. So Michelle finally responds, and they meet at a mutual place. And she's like, we cannot be together. I have a wife, I have a husband, you have a wife. This thing was supposed to be just fun. You obviously haven't done this before. So this cannot be. So he gets upset, and he starts to kind of going back to Shelly and agrees to go on a hike with her. So they go on a hike, and you can kind of see she's having a great time. She's like, okay, we're finally like connecting in some way, blah, blah, blah. And he just looks more resentful to the point where they're standing up on a hill looking out, and he decides this part just to push her off the hill. So they push her off the hill, and she lands, and we think that she was like just badly injured, but she doesn't. She just has like a broken leg in some way. So he sees that the attempt failed, so he runs down. He's like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," blah blah blah. And she's like, "Get away from me, fucking psycho." So she sprays him with mace, get in the car, and fucking leaves him in the park, and she drives off. But you see like in her eyes as she's driving him off, she's getting like happier, like she's starting to smile a little more because she's out of the fucking dysfunctional relationship. So there's that one. And then we move on to episode 3, which is called The House of Special Purpose. So this one follows this takes place in Austria, and it follows this actress Olivia, who goes to Austria to be part of to star in a miniseries about the Romanoffs family, and the death of them, like the more direct story. So she goes to do it, and she meets the director Jacqueline, and Jacqueline is very eccentric. She's off the wall and everything, and she's very passionate, but she's also a Romanoff descent, or claims to be, but we find out later on that she's not. That this is all more for like her passion project more than anything. So she goes there, but she kind of realizes all the actors there are just so fucking weird. Like, and they're getting praises from the director by doing completely stupid things. Like, one of the guys in the middle of a scene will just start singing "Suspicious Minds" by Elvis. And Jacqueline's like, yes, that's amazing. And so Olivia starts acting, and she does it. I personally think she does it well, but that's the point that they're trying to do, is to make you see that she's a good actress, but apparently she's not convincing to the director. She's like, you could do better. And so she's getting frustrated because she feels like she's not doing well. but everybody else is doing silly, stupid stuff and going off script, but they're getting praised for it. So she decides to leave. She's like, I quit, I'm not doing this anymore. She goes, takes a walk in the forest nearby the set. She gets lost, but then she gets found by one of her agent. And her agent guides her back to their house, and she goes back to her room, kind of calms down. And then she gets erupted by these soldiers that are there, and which they're dressed up in the Bolshevik type of like uniforms, the same ones that murdered the Romanoffs. So she kind of assumes this is a role thing. So she's like, cool, let me get dressed, blah, blah, blah. She's like, nope, you come now. So they basically grabbed her, bring her down to this basement, and she's freaking out because she thinks this might be real. And she sees the other actors that are there that are part of the family, and they're all dressed up in their look. And they look kind of concerned too, but I'm guessing she's assuming that they just happen to be kidnapped in the same type of thing. So she goes to, she sees it and everybody starts getting shot by these soldiers, and she gets so scared that she ends up dying from fright. But we find out the whole production was just to get her to have a realistic performance, because they don't think that she's really that great of an actor or actress. And so she ends up in the end dying of fear from that whole like scene. So it's insane. The whole thing is very beautiful, by the way, if you're just watching it just for the visuals. So we go to episode 4, which is called Expectations, and it takes place in New York City, and it follows this woman named Julia, and Julia has a daughter, and we start off with Julia having a lunch meeting with her daughter, and just kind of just like critiquing her life and everything, and her daughter's pregnant, so she's not having it. So Julia is also married, so she has a husband named Eric, and so everything is going well. You don't really know anything about it, but then we run into this guy named Daniel, and we find out Daniel is Eric's best friend, and Daniel has an issue because he is tired of being shunned out from the family, because he actually is the father of Ella, the daughter that's pregnant, and from a affair that happened way back when they had an affair, and then during the time that she was still with Eric. So then when she found out that she was pregnant, she just told Eric that it was his, and they just kind of ran off with it. And he doesn't know anything about the affair. So we go on throughout the day. It happens in one day. And throughout the day, she gets more obsessed with the affair, because she realizes like, oh my god, that happened, blah blah blah. So it starts eating her up pretty bad, to the point where she starts imagining a situation where she tells her husband that she had the affair, and in her head, like, it goes very well, because she's like, you chose me in the end, so that's all that matters, blah blah blah. But it all becomes more of an illusion, because she never really does tell him, and then it goes over to where she ends up getting some gallstones, and she gets hospitalized, and she ends up so Eric shows up, is their support, and then he leaves, and then Ella shows up, and they're just having a heart-to-heart and everything. But then for some reason it gets a little light. It gets weird because there's something that's missing. So Ella kind of knows that. She's like, do you want to call him? And we find out that what him is Daniel. So Daniel is the guy that she wants to call. But we find out that Ella knew about the affair from the get-go. So yeah, and also a little side note, Daniel is a Romanoff historian, and also we're assuming that he's also a Romanoff descendant in some way, because he also was in the other on the cruise in the other episode where he was the benefactor of that cruise. So there's a little little Easter egg part. And also, he also wrote a novel inspired by the other episode that happened with Olivia and Jacqueline, based off of that situation. So that is the 4th episode, and this concludes our part 1. So stay tuned for part 2, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Leave a comment below and tell me what you thought about episode 1 to 4, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.